On today's episode of The Joy of Editing, it's another full edit. There's an image download for you as well as the PDF notes so that you can follow along. We're going to do an image of some Sarus cranes, so stay tuned. Hello everyone and welcome to The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. It is TK Friday again, my favorite day of the week, and I hope it is yours too. Today we're doing an image of some Sarus cranes. I'm going to take a little more creative approach to this image, so all you bird lovers out there, if I go a little over the top, please forgive me a little bit. But I want to try something a little bit different today. This image comes to us by Sanjeev Atre. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, please forgive me. This image starts out in Lightroom. I used a linear profile for the camera. It was a Canon EOS 7D Mark II. Some basic adjustments here, and I also always do lens corrections, remove chromatic aberrations, as well as enable profile corrections. But that is it. And when you download the image, it's going to look just like this. It'll be a TIFF file. And please download the image and follow along. And also, don't forget to download the PDF notes, which is going to take you step by step through this entire edit. And this is a labor of love. This is my way of giving back to everyone. And I want to thank each and every one of you who subscribe and comment and share. That really means a lot to me. It helps to promote this channel. And when you do that, I appreciate it. By the way, if you don't yet own the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, just click on my affiliate link. It's right below in the description. Click on that link. It'll take you to the TK web store. You could purchase training videos, the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. And if you use my promo code DK15, you'll save 15% off your entire purchase. You're supporting The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly when you do that. And for that, I thank you. And by the way, in case you don't know, Tony Kuiper puts out a blog called The Good Light Journal. I highly recommend it. Subscribe to it. You're going to get a lot of good information in here. He discusses the TK8 plugin for Photoshop and all kind of stuff, and you'll see some of Tony's work in here. But he gives you a lot of good tips and a lot of good information, as you can see. And all you need to do is go to the description of my video and click on Show More, and just scroll down, and you're going to find information about Tony Kuiper right here, TK8 plugin for Photoshop links, and you're going to find Tony Kuiper's blog, Good Light Journal. Just click on that and subscribe to that. Show Tony some love. Give yourself a present and sign up for Tony's blog. If you get Tony's blog, you're going to learn a lot of good information about TK8 plugin for Photoshop as well as Photoshop. Now, I almost forgot to mention I did do a crop on this image. As you can see, I just cropped in this way, more of a portrait look. I just liked it. Again, I'm taking some artistic license on this image today. Here we are in Photoshop. Are you ready to have some fun? Let's get to the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. So the first thing I always like to do is do a balance and contrast after I bring my image in from Lightroom. We're going to click on the luminosity mask icon, and I always click on midtones 3. This just protects my shadows and highlights from clipping, and we're going to output this to a color grading tool, and we're going to make some adjustments. I'll start out with shadows, so I'm going to click on the black block for shadows and just drag this a little bit over to the left just to enrich those shadows just a little wee bit, maybe just somewhere right about there, I think is good. Now we're going to go to midtones, and we're going to open up those midtones to somewhere like right about here, I think is good. And now we're going to go to highlights, and we're just going to open up the highlights to say somewhere maybe right here, I think is going to be good. And now let's take a look. Here is the before, and here's the after. Not a big adjustment, but to me, this is how I get my creative juices flowing. You know, I get this balance and contrast down, and then it kind of helps center me, and then I can look and determine what I want to do next. I take a troubleshooting approach to my editing. You know, I'm looking for problems, I'm fixing problems, and I fix one thing and then something else shows up and then I fix that, and before long I'm done. But that's the way I like to tackle an edit. And let me know in the comments section your editing approach. How do you like to start your edits out, and what's your philosophy in editing? I'm sure we'd all like to hear, because we all do things differently. But one thing I can say for sure, no matter what your editing approach is, what I'm teaching on these TK Friday videos will adapt to any editing style. As I study this image, I feel I want these birds to be lighter. So I want to lighten them next. So what we're going to do is select the subject. Now, the select subject, I'll be honest with you, did not work that well for these birds. I thought this would be like a shoo-in for Photoshop. I thought it's going to do a great job. But as I zoom in here, as you can see, it doesn't do a really good job up here. When I did the initial edit, what I did was went to the object selection tool, and I was going to try to, add or subtract from this, and that didn't work so well. And also, for select subject, I was also set for cloud. So you get the best results for the cloud. It did well everywhere else on the bird, but not on the head. So to combat that, I clicked on the S and M button. That's for selected mask in Photoshop. And that brings us to selected mask. And I'll show you how I fixed this. Now, I started off using this tool here, which is the Refine Edge brush, and I wasn't getting good results with that either. So I went with just the regular brush tool. And all I did was painted in the areas that were missing. AI is great, but sometimes it just doesn't do it. So I had to rely on the human element here. I had to do all my painting by hand. Now, when I want to subtract, I hold down the Alt or Option key to subtract like I'm doing here, and I just don't hold it down when I want to paint in. So it's all just hand painted in here, and it'll be done here in a second or two. And that's it, all hand painted. It wasn't that hard to do, but it did really well on all the other parts of the bird. So just that head, which is crucial. I needed that. Now I'm going to output this as a selection, so just click OK. And now we have our bird selected. I'm going to click this button right here to go back to fit the screen. Now I'll show you what we do next. Now this is where you got to put on your thinking cap. You spent all this time getting this selection, right? So it's not a bad idea to save it. So on the CX or combo panel, you can click this icon. You can save that out. I'm just going to call this birds and click OK. And that saves it as a channel. And I did it the other day, so you can see I have these other two channels here. By the way, if you want to get rid of a channel, just click on the channel and click on the trash can. That gets rid of the channel. Do you want to delete the birds? Yes, because I just made a new one. Okay, so I'll click on the other one, which was a background. We'll be making a background too, by the way, so I'm going to go ahead and click the trash can and delete this one because I'll show you how I made that one. So I'm going to delete that one. So I have the bird channel that I just made right here saved in my channels. Can be used anytime we need it. And we actually need it right now. So let's come up. Right now you see my color grading tool up here. Just click the X and you'll see the multi-mask panel. Click on the My Channels icon. Now we have two options here. We have an active selection, as you can see by the marching ants. So I could choose active selection or birds. Either one, it doesn't really matter. Whichever one you choose, you will get the bird. So I'm just going to use birds. And I want to go ahead and intersect this with a midtones 3 and use a color grading tool. So what we'll do is use the mask calculator. So click on the mask calculator. Very simple. Click on X for intersect. X out of this. Click on the luminosity mask icon and click on midtones 3. And now we need to complete the calculation by clicking on the equals. And you can see I have a midtones 3 on the birds. And now we'll simply output it to a color grading tool and we'll lighten up our birds. I will start with shadows, so click on the black block. And I'm just going to drag that to the left slightly just to increase the contrast in the darker tones. And now we're going to go to midtones. And we're going to open up those midtones a good bit to somewhere right around in here and see how those birds just lighten right up. Isn't that nice? Here's the before and here is the after. Now with my troubleshooting approach, I look at this image and I say, I got light birds. That background is really light. I would really like to darken it down, but I want to darken it down with like a gradient. Have it mainly up at the top part and just gradually taper off as it comes down to the bottom, but darken it up, and we'll build contrast that way. I need to get to the multi-mask panel, so let's X out the color grading tool. Nothing changes here. Let's go to My Channels, and let's click on Birds. Now, I don't really want the birds. I want the opposite of that. So we can click this Invert button, and we can invert it. And let's go ahead and save it out as a background channel, because I think we're going to be needing that later, and we'll just call this background, and click OK. And now you can see it's down here. It lives in our channels. Now we can click this X because we have that background saved. So now we're going to come, and to darken, I always like to use a curves adjustment. So click on the curves adjustment icon. Let's put a black mask on it. Let's put it in the multiply blend mode, which will darken. And I want this again to get dark at the top and gradually get light to the bottom. So I'm going to get a gradient tool. So click on the gradient tool from your tool well. Now Right now, you see I have a white swatch of paint. If I hold my shift key and drag down from the top, you can see I can draw a gradient. But I didn't like the result I was getting there. I found I had a better result if I swap this to black. So you can click right here and swap it, or type your X key, it'll swap it. And what I do is come at the bottom, hold the shift key down, and just drag up to, say right around here. So I get more of that area darkened in the background. Now that's way too dark, but you can see it's dark up here and it gradually fades off. But I want it to fade off right in this area, so that's good. I wasn't getting that result when I started at the top and went down. I found I got a better result from going from the bottom and going up. But you never know unless you try something. But as you can see now, my birds are darkened. That looks horrible. But we have an opacity slider. Let's pull this back, and I think I started out at around like 48%. Here's the before and here's the after. So the before and the after. So that's looking good, but it's still over my birds. So let's come up to my channels. Now this is important. We have a layer mask on here. So click on layer mask and you can see there's our gradient. Click on the mask calculator, click X to intersect, X out of here, go back to my channels, and now we're going to select the background. And now we have to make the calculation, so click equals. And now you see our birds are going to be protected. And now all we need to do is output that to the layer by clicking this icon right here. And now our birds are protected. Here's the before, and here is the after. Now I felt I needed that a little bit darker, so I went ahead and pulled the opacity up to about, I think it was around 63%. Now here's the before and here's the after, but look at that nice contrast we're building. And now as I study the image, I feel that the bird's beaks are a little bit too light, so I just want to darken them down slightly. To darken, I always like to use the curves adjustment layer, black mask, multiply blend mode. And let's try a luminosity mask. So let's click on this icon. That's a lights 1. Let's try a lights 2. I'm trying to get really good separation. I'm getting great separation here. But let's try different channels here. Here's red, here's green, now here is blue. And blue gives me really good separation from the background. And now we can refine that, so let's click on the levels adjustment. It's my favorite adjustment for refining a mask. I'll start by taking the highlight slider and dragging it to the left, maybe somewhere right about here. Now I'm pulling up some highlights in the background here, so we can tighten up the shadows. Let's move this over to right here. See how that goes away? And now let's take the midtones and move this over to here. And now this is nice and light, and I'm getting great separation back there. Now I think I'll just paint this adjustment on with a brush. So I'll put this to a black mask, painting with a white brush through a selection. So click this icon. And you can see our selection indicator showing we're painting through a selection. So I'm just going to get a little bit larger brush right around here, painting at 100% opacity. And this will be too dark, but that's okay. Just over all these light areas here, watching that I stay away from the eye. And make my brush smaller and get the top of the head of the bird. I don't know what you call that area, but I just want to darken that as well, right up in there. And by George, I think I've got it. Now let's take a look. Here's the before and here's the after. But I think that's too strong. Let's take our opacity the whole way off and build it up slowly and stop where we like it. And I think I like it maybe right here at 31%. So here's the before and here's the after. Now we can always come back again before and after and readjust that later, but I think that helps. The next thing I'd like to do is add some clarity to these birds. Now we do have a selection here, but that's not a problem because when we go to TK action, so click the TK, click on clarity, and when we do, you'll see that selection will go away. You see that? It just deselects itself. I'm looking at the birds and I think I want to change this radius. Right now the detail's pretty fine at 10 pixels. So I'm going to take this up to, I think, like 30. And I like that. I'm going to click OK. Now, when I do that, you'll see here's the before and here's the after. So we've added detail everywhere, but I only want it on the birds, but we have a bird channel, right? There's a button on the combo or CX panel, and it's this button right here. When you click it, it'll let you know what channels you've saved out. And we have a bird in the background channel, so we can click on birds, and it applies that mask right to that layer. So check it out. Here's the before. Now check the birds. It's only going to be on the birds, and here is the after. So now we have a nice little clarity boost on those birds. Another TK action you may want to try is the soft pop action. Tony Kuiper told me that one's really good for fur and feathers, so you may want to give that one a try as well. I'm noticing this area of the bird's a little bit too light, so I think I'm going to go back to the layer that I lightened the birds. That's the third layer here, and just pull back on the opacity just a little wee bit, maybe to right there. And I think that's good. Let's go back up to the clarity layer. I think I want to just bring up the overall midtones a little bit, lighten up the midtones. So let's go and grab a luminosity mask. I always like to use midtones 1 for just a minimal midtone boost. So click on midtones 1. I'll put it to a curves adjustment layer. We're going to put it in the screen blend mode. Now, as soon as I click this screen blend mode, you'll see the image lighten slightly. So I'm clicking it right now. See it lighten up just a little bit. And I always like to add a little bit of a contrast boost to it. So if you come to presets, I always like to use strong contrast. Now I'm going to click it and watch the image. It just adds a little bit of extra contrast in there, and that's nice. So here's the before and here's the after. So just that little bit of a mid-tone boost. After the clarity adjustment, these beaks got a little lighter. Let me show you. Let me shut the clarity layer off. Watch the beaks. See how they got lighter? So what I'm going to do is come to the layer with the beaks. That's this one right here. And I'm just going to increase this opacity to like right here. The next thing I like to do is maybe just bring this background a little bit darker. Now it's good to name your layers, but I know it's right here, and I typically do, but during a video I just don't have the time. So I'm going to click on this layer and let's increase that opacity to maybe right there, like 73. Now this next step is purely artistic on my part. I think the bird's legs are a little bit too light. I want to darken them and get them closer in respect to the heads up here. Not too much, but just a little bit. I think it'll make the image visibly more appealing, but you know, that's probably the right tone of those legs. That's why I say an artistic decision. So we're going to get a curves adjustment layer. You can leave this step out if you don't want to do it. Black mask, multiply blend mode to darken. I think a color mask will work, so let's click on the color mask and let's pick a tone that represents these legs like right here and click OK. And as we can see, we have a pretty good selection. Now let's lighten up that selection to maybe somewhere right around in there. Let me see if I can tighten up this selection a little bit. I'll just take this bottom slider and drag it into the left just a little bit to maybe right around there. See how it tightens it up? Now let's get a lasso tool. You can type L, that's a shortcut for the lasso tool. And let's just drag around these legs here. Hold your shift key down to add to that selection, and we'll drag around these legs like that. And we can do a mask the mask, so we can click this icon right here. There's no need for feathering. We can just click cancel, and there is our selection. And now we can simply output this to that layer by clicking this icon like that, and our legs are darkened. Now let's check this out. Here's the before, and here is the after. So they're a little darker. But I think I'll pull the opacity back to right about here. I think that's good. Here's the before, and here's the after, just slightly darker. I just think it looks, again, visually more appealing. And now, again, another artistic interpretation. I want these heads to have a little more saturation in the red area. So, again, I'm going to grab a color mask. So click on this icon. And I'm going to click like right here. I think that's going to get it, and click OK. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. Let's lighten up that selection to maybe right here. And let me see if I can tighten it up by dragging this slider to the left a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. See how it's knocking the eyes out, so we're not going to get adjustment there. And I think that's going to be good. And now with our lasso tool, let's just lasso around the heads. Let's mask the mask. We don't need to feather. We can click cancel. And now let's output this to a hue saturation adjustment layer, and let's increase that saturation. I know some of you out there are saying, don't do it, you're going to mess it up. But I want to do it, so I'm going to do it. I think maybe right there. A little more saturation. Here's the before, and here's the after. Since I've increased this saturation, I feel this saturation needs to come up a little bit. So what we can do is come to layer 8. That's where the bird's legs were darkened. Click on that. And what you want to do is click on this icon to add a hue saturation layer above that layer. We're going to clip it to that layer, by clicking this paperclip icon. And now when we adjust this saturation, it'll only affect the bird's legs. So let's start to drag this to the right, and I'm just trying to get it to look like everything balances in. I think right here at around 80, maybe I'll back it off. Maybe say around 70. Here is the before and here is after. But again, it brings it into balance. Well, what's next? I think this grass is a little bit too light. I'd like to bring it down in value a little bit. And I think a color mask will work. So let's click on that. And click an area like right about here and click OK. Now we're going to go ahead and lighten up that mask to maybe somewhere right about here. Now we can tighten it. You see we got some of the bird in here. So let's drag this top slider into the right and see if we can get that to go pretty much away. Right there does it. Now we can refine further by clicking on the levels adjustment, and we're going to start to drag just the midtone slider to lighten up the entire selection to maybe somewhere right about here. I think is good. I think that's got it. Now we can mask the mask. Let's grab our lasso tool. Just type L to get your lasso tool. And let's just select the area of the grass. I'm going to come around that bird there. I don't need that right there. Maybe right around like so. Come the whole way down and up. Now I missed a little area here. I could hold my shift key down and just lasso around that area like that. Now we got it. Now we can click on the mask icon. We don't need to feather it, so we can just click cancel. And let's output that to a color grading tool. So let's click on the color grading tool icon, and now we can make an adjustment. I think just a midtone adjustment, so let's click on the midtone block, the gray block, and drag this back to about here. And you see how that darkens it? Here's the before, and here's the after. And the reason I chose a color grading tool is because I want to color grade it a little bit. I want to favor the grass a little bit more towards green. So I'm going to drag this up to like right about here. You see how I get a little more green out of there? Here's the before and here's the after. And I think that helps. If it's too strong, I can just back this off a little bit, the midtone. Maybe right there. Here's a before and here's an after. And I like it. Now, I think I want to decrease the saturation in the background. So there's a real easy way of doing this. Because remember, we saved a background channel. Let's X out of the color grading tool. Click on the hue saturation adjustment layer. Click this icon and choose background. It applies that background channel as a mask on this layer. And let's just decrease that saturation a little bit. And I'm thinking maybe right around there, -16. Here's the before and here's the after. Just a bit of a saturation decrease. I think it helps. Now, if you look at the overall image, there's a bunch of things that could be taken out of here. And I think a spot healing tool can really help. See, like here and over here, these grasses, there's some little like light areas, little dots up here, probably some bugs flying around. We can fix all that. There's an area right here around the birds that we're going to have some issues with. So what we're going to do is this. We're going to put a blank pixel layer above here. Click this button right here. That puts a blank pixel layer. Let's start out with the spot healing tool. So grab your spot healing tool, which is right here. It's actually a spot healing brush. I want to protect the birds because there's some areas around the birds that I don't want to hit. So to do that, let's click on My Channels. Now we want to work in the background, so let's click on Background. Now we need to output this. We'll output it to a selection, so click this button right here. And now we have a selection. We don't see the marching ants, but you can see by our selection indicator here and around the combo panel that we do have a selection. And now with that spot healing tool, watch. And this is all out of focus back here. I can just paint over areas like this, and they get fixed over these grasses. And I'll make my brush a little smaller and go over this piece of grass. Any of these lighter areas that are drawing my eye, I'm just going to paint over them and they'll kind of fade away. See this little light area right here? I can fade that off. I sped the video up and I'm just getting all these little areas. Anything that bothers my eye, I'm getting rid of it. And sometimes you got to paint over things twice, maybe 3 times, just to get it to look natural. And again, these little light areas will really draw your eye, so I'm just trying to get rid of them all. And we're pretty close to being done here, even up in this top right-hand corner. This area right here bugs me, but I'm not going to use the spot healing tool on it. I'm going to use a clone stamp tool. I'm going to type my S key. And what I'll do is I'll sample from this area up in here, maybe make my brush a little bit larger, and just kind of paint on this area right here. And like I said, I have that selection of the background, so it's protecting the birds. because when I used the spot healing tool over here, it was sampling from the birds, and that wasn't working out. That's why I did it that way. And there's a little dot here. I'm just going to use the clone stamp tool to get rid of that. I have a couple little areas. I'm going to type J to get the spot healing tool and just clean these up here, staying away from the bird there so it doesn't sample from the bird. This is being stubborn, so I got to hit it a few times. But now let's take a look at the before. Here's the before. You see all that mess back there? It really draws the eye, and it doesn't look good. And here is the after. Doesn't that look much better? I zoomed in to focus on the bird's eyes. You see how they're not the same value and lightness? I would like to equalize that and get them close to each other. I'll grab my object selection tool. It's in the lasso mode and circle around this bird's eye. I want to darken this bird's eye. I'm going to output that to a color grading tool. So click on the color grading tool. Now you must click the plus here to add the mask to it. And I'll start with the shadows. Click on the shadows because the darker areas will get darker. Watch. See that, how they get a little darker? And next I want to darken the eye. So I'm going to click on the midtone block and just darken this eye up just a little wee bit. Maybe to right there. And now I want to lighten this bird's eye, so I'm going to go ahead and circle around it with the object selection tool. Output it to a color grading tool. Now here's the color grading tool, so I just click on the plus, and now we got that eye selected. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the shadow block and darken the shadow areas of the eye to like right there. And now I'm going to click on the midtone block and try to match it to the lightness of this eye by dragging this to the right. Just get them closer in value. And I think right there is good. Now here's before with both eyes, and here's after. And I think they look a lot more equal. Just a few more finishing touches and we'll be done. I want to close off the bottom of the image and the top. We'll start with the bottom. So let's go ahead. Let's X out this color grading tool. Let's grab a curves adjustment layer, put a black mask on it, and let's go ahead and put it in the multiply blend mode to darken. Let's grab a gradient tool, make sure your white swatch is on the top, and I'm going to hold my shift key down, and that just constrains the crop to keep it straight, and drag up into right about here. And see how that just darkens off the bottom of the image? Now it's getting into the bird's legs, so we can take care of that. Let's click on My Channels. What we need to do is select the layer mask, and you can see there's our layer mask with a gradient. Then click the mask calculator button, click X to intersect. Then we'll X out of here, go back to My Channels. We're going to grab the background this time. We're going to click equal to make the calculation. And now you can see the bird's legs are protected. And we're going to output this to our layer. And now we can see here is our bottom closed off. Here's the before, and here is the after. And let's reduce that opacity. It's too strong right about there. Here's the before, and here's the after. So that closes off the bottom. And now let's close off the top. And I really want to darken. I really want to pull down a good bit to darken a lot of this area up in here. So let's grab a curves adjustment layer, black mask, multiply blend mode. Grab our gradient tool, white swatch on top. Hold your shift key down to constrain. And we're going to drag down to maybe right about here. Now that's way too strong, but we're not going to worry about that now because we can fix it. But we need to protect the heads of the birds. So let's come up to My Channels, grab the layer mask, click on the mask calculator button, click X to intersect. Let's X out of here. Let's go back to My Channels, click on background. Now let's make the calculation clicking equal. And now you can see the birds' heads are protected. And now let's output this to the layer. And now the bird's heads are protected. It's too strong. Let's pull back on this opacity to maybe somewhere right about here. I think that's good. Here's the before, and here is the after. Now one final step, and that's going to be a freehand vignette. Let's grab our lasso tool. Just type L to get your lasso tool. And we're just going to draw a freehand vignette around this whole area. Just like that. And now we can come to the TK Actions, so click the TK Actions button, click on Freehand Vignette, and just click OK. And there it is. Now that's too strong. Let's pull this opacity back to maybe right about here. Here's the before, and here is the after. Now we can protect our darkest shadows. We can double click right here, opens up your layer style properties, and we're going to go to blend diff. So come down here. We'll be working on the underlying layer. I'm going to drag the shadow slider over to right around 21 right there. Hold down your Alt or Option, depending if you're on a Mac or PC, and let's click on the right side and split this. And we're going to drag it over to right about here and click OK. Now let's take a look. Here is the before and here is the after. Let's take a look and see how far we've come. Let me click on my before after action. Here's where we started and here is where we ended up at. Quite a difference. Well, there it is, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this one today and I hope you give it a try. Download the image, download the PDF notes. Hey, if you enjoyed the tutorial today, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe and click that bell notification icon. Every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll get a notification. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. And I'll see you all right here next time. But until then, happy editing!